Hey guys, welcome back to Tethan Props. This is part 2 video of making Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber sword. So this is a design that was based off Jake Bartok's amazing art. So check out his Instagram, I'll put a link to the first video below. But what I'm doing here is unwrapping my new Anycubic Mono X printer. So this is a brand new resin printer that I picked up, really big, really great, really fast, really happy with it. So I'll do a little bit of a talk about that printer as we go. But right now, what I need to do is get the 3D prints that I created in my previous video. So if you missed that, I started from scratch, just had an image of what I wanted to design, designed it all up in CAD over a long process. So I talked you through that process. Check it out if you're interested. But right now, I'm just getting the files ready for slicing. So you import them in, slice them onto USB, take your USB out and put it in your printer. So it's kind of easy as that. Transfer it across and get the print started. This print on this new printer took about 7 hours all up. So when 3D printing, it depends on the height of the print. So the pommel on this one was quite big, so it took a bit longer, but for this super fast printer, 7 hours is actually very, very quick. So here's a quick time lapse of it. So once the prints are finished, you've got to pull them off the print bed. So wearing gloves obviously, because you don't want to get this resin all over your hands and skin, because it can be quite toxic in its liquid form. So you just want to pull the prints off the printer nice and gently. Any excess resin you just want to drain back in, but now we need to get them off the print bed. So using a spatula, you just be pretty careful to wedge them off, nice and careful without scratching the actual build plate, because you don't want to do that. And once you've got them off, if there's any excess resin that comes off the prints, just wipe them off with a paper towel. So once you've wiped all the parts down, it's time to clean them in isopropyl alcohol. So I have a magnetic mixer here that I have full of isopropyl alcohol that I clean all the parts in, leave them in there for about a minute or so just to clean off the excess. And then you go and you clean off all the IPA in warm soapy water. So having only done one print with this so far, I can already see a way that I can modify this printer to make it work better for me. So what this needs is some kind of handle, so I can just pick it up by the handle, pull it on, pull it off, rather than having to use your 2 hands and try to be super careful. So it's a little bit heavy, which is one thing, but I think what I need to do is go 3D print a nice handle for this, and I'll do that on my filament printer. Alrighty guys, so here's the UV cover and here's the handle that I printed. So printed in PLA, super strong. I probably can't break that if I tried. So this will do really well. It's got 2 screw holes in there, and this will sit right up on top there, and it means I'll be easily able to lift the whole thing on and off just with one hand. So I'm just screwing it in now, and the hole that I drilled is actually perfect size for this to just thread itself in. But just to be sure, because I don't want this handle falling off, I'm still going to put the nut on the other side, even though I think that's definitely strong enough. Feels definitely strong enough. Obviously I'm not going to be swinging around everywhere, so I won't break the 3D print, but as you can see, nice and screwed in there. All right. There we go. First modification to the printer. All right. Let's get back to these lightsaber bits. Alrighty, so we're up to the next stage. So the prints have come off the printer, I've cleaned them up. 3D printing, there's so many different times throughout the process or steps throughout the process where things can go wrong. So at this stage, you need to cure them. If you don't cure them correctly, they're always going to be a little bit soft, and like you can feel they're soft to the touch versus one that's already been cured. So this is for Aragon's lightsaber. much harder than these ones. They're still a bit soft on the surface, and that's because when they're 3D printing, it's not 3D printed to its full cure. You still need to do a little bit of post-processing after to get them to their final stage. So to do that, I have this 60 watt UV light, very bright. So I've got it inside just a box that's covered with aluminium foil, so it acts as like a reflective, so it just means that the whole thing gets a good dose of UV. So if I chuck all my pieces in there, and then I turn it on, and it's a sealed box, so I don't get any UV light on my skin sitting next to it, but I can probably leave that now for about 5 minutes. I'll rotate the pieces a little bit, flip them upside down so you get the underneath of them as well, and yeah, then that'll be fully cured. The parts are fully cured. I had to cut the handle in half a little bit here because I realized that I'd split it or sliced it in the wrong spot on the 3D program, but that's all fine because I can put it all back together later. So the parts have been cured. I ended up having to cut the handle in half here because this is actually where the connection between the two pieces will be, not between these two pieces. So easy fix, can fix that up later, but now it's time to go sand these off. So I'm going to take them outside, sand them down on my belt sander, and then we can move on to the next stage. So I finished all the sanding. There's a lot of dust on them, so I've now got to go give them a wash, clean them up, make sure free of all the dust. I'm going to put them back in the curing box just for a little bit longer, just to make sure that, especially on the insides where now I get much better exposure to these, I've got to make sure it's all fully cured, and then we can move on to assembly. So I've got all my parts ready for assembly here. The few extra things I have is some PVC conduit, as well as some 25mm couplers. These go over the top, and it's what I use for joining the two pieces together. And then this one, I've sanded out a little bit, so it actually fits a lightsaber blade perfectly. So these are all the bits I need, and I think I'm going to start off with the top section here. The connector for the lightsaber needs to be glued in the top there, so it's quite a snug fit. So what I'm going to do is put some glue in there and then push it in. Alright, and then we just push it in. So now the next thing, I need to glue PVC core up through the middle of the handle, and it joins into the coupler at the top there. So this one's a lot simpler. Just glue around on the inside, have an excess amount so it'll push through, and then just a little bit on the top here so it glues into the coupler. And push it all the way through, just like that. The next thing I need to do is glue in this midsection. So this, just slide over the top and glue on there. It's got no orientation, so I don't have to worry about that. So if I just put a nice bit of glue, glue the two edges together. So now I can cut this. These couplers go about 25mm down, so if your cut here is longer than 25mm, it won't actually fit together properly, but you want to make it as close to that as possible, so then you get the tightest fit between them, because you don't want your two lightsaber bits falling apart. So I always cut it in excess to start with, because you can always go back later and cut it down a little bit more, but you can't add any extra on. So I'm going to go cut that one now. The next thing I need to do is drill out the hole for the light here. So now I'm just going to drill that hole out. There we go. So that is the button section done. Now it's time to glue on the two wings. Just put on a good amount of super glue because you want it to spread once you put it together. Line it up correctly. Right, so I'm going to let that one sit for a bit and then I'll do the other side. So while that first side is fully setting, I'm going to work on the bottom section here. So got a little bit of water on there, so just make sure whenever you're gluing that everything is just 100% dry before you glue, otherwise it can kind of mess up the glue a little bit. So I've got my second coupler here. This one's again quite easy, just put some glue in and then we'll just push it in. Push it in place. So this one has to go all the way down. This one was sticking out quite a little bit because I wanted to have it raised a little bit because when I'm putting in the blade later, I don't want to chip these Jedi emblems. So as long as the actual coupler is sitting above that, I won't ever damage those. But this one, I want to have completely flush. Just like that. So this is the PVC cord that's in here. So it just slots in perfectly like that and has a nice tight fit. So that one's essentially done for now. I think this one is probably, ready to glue on the next side. So it's a little bit harder to glue on the other side because you can't hold it as easily. But we'll just do the exact same thing. Good amount of super glue. So now, let's just let this sit for a bit and then we can move on to the next stage. The thing that I forgot to mention was, before I started gluing this together, I actually sanded down the angle of what the crossguard attached to the midsection was. So originally it was straight up and down, but I sanded it down so it was on an angle, and it means I can probably actually hide the seams in a much better way. So yeah, just one little modification that I did before gluing it together, and I think it's gonna look a lot better once I go back and sand this down a little bit to make the transition perfect, but you won't be able to see those seams after I've finished. So to clean up the seams where it's joined, I'm just going to take a bit of sandpaper because there's a little bit of excess glue that's around there, so that's fine. I'm just going to take the sandpaper, sand it, maybe add some glue to just fully smooth it out, but the aim is to make it so you can't see the transition from where I glued the crossguard onto the midsection. So there we go, the transitions are really nice. Probably not showing up too well on camera here. Looks a bit messy, but you know what? Once this is all uniform, you'll be able to see that the transitions are actually really quite nice there. So the next step I need to do is just give it a quick clean because I've sanded it. There's obviously a lot of dust all over it. So I'm gonna give it a quick clean, and then we can throw down a layer of primer just to double check that assembly is perfect, because right now it's really hard to tell if there's any imperfections anywhere or something like that. So once you put a layer of primer, you can get a good look at all the pieces and just make sure that assembly's been perfect. So first is a wash, and then we can start painting. I've got my parts cleaned and ready to put down the layer of primer. I've got my spare PVC cutoffs here that I use for painting. So I just want to make sure that I block off the internals here, the connection here, and also the internals here, because if you get paint on them, it's going to affect how well it can go together. So the good thing about using these scrap PVC pipes is they also act as handles, so it makes it easier to paint. So I've got my grey spray paint primer warming up at the moment. Once that can is warm, I'll go and put a layer of the whole thing, and then I'll see where we're at. So you can see the first layer of primer down, and it is looking really nice. You can see a little bit of, I don't know what this is, to be honest. I think it's just the surface of the 3D print was a little bit rougher for a certain section of it. So it was printed like this, and you can see in the top bit here and just a bit here, it's a little bit rougher. So what I'm going to do is just sand it down, sand another round just around here, give it another coat of primer and see how it looks. But I think once I do that, it will be pretty much ready to start painting. So let's go put another coat of primer on this. And there we go, guys. After a couple rounds of sanding and repriming, sanding, repriming, we've got a really nice transition on all the parts. It's all looking super smooth and ready to start painting. So that's going to be the end of this video, guys. That was printing and assembly. Hope you enjoyed it. The next stage will be painting, doing the electronics, and then doing the blade. So that'll be another few videos, so stay tuned for those ones. But there we go, guys. That is the lightsaber assembled and first layer of primer down. Hope you enjoyed. See you on the next one.